4 matchups this weekend involve unbeaten Power 5 teams, and this is one of them. Number 7 USC and a team that maybe has a case to be ranked, Oregon State. This Pac-12 battle goes down at 9:30 Eastern on the Pac-12 Network. Let's welcome in the owner of BeaverBlitz.com, Angie Machado, and USCFootball.com's Chris Treviño. Chris, there are a lot of new faces on this team, but no doubt the Trojans do not forget last year's loss to the Beavers in the Coliseum. So what will it take for USC to enact some revenge this year?
USC basically has to keep the formula they've been doing in the first 3 games of the season. Get the ball, score early and often, and then let that defense, which has been very opportunistic, leading the nation in turnover margin, leading the Pac-12 in turnovers, to get the ball back for them. It's a bend don't break defense. They're giving up a lot of yards, but they're not letting opponents score. And that's a beautiful formula for this offense that just keeps scoring at will. That's what it's going to take for them on the road in a very tough environment in Corvallis.
So just like Chris said, Oregon State has a very bend don't break defense. But Oregon State really is going to need to control the ball, hold on to the ball, don't turn over the ball, and try to establish that run game as quickly as possible. Oregon State likes to defer that coin toss if they were to win. I could see them wanting to take the ball from the start, score before USC can get a chance to make that score and run away with it early.
Now, the big men up front don't necessarily generate any headlines, but they could be the difference in this game, right, Angie?
I think Oregon State's offensive line is probably one of the most underranked in the country. And I like the matchup with the trenches with USC's defensive front. Last year, Oregon State was able to run the ball at will against that front. They have a few new faces, but Oregon State will look to establish the run, which they're hoping to do so with Damian Martinez and Deshaun Fenwick. I also like Chance Nolan. He's been able to establish the deep ball here this season and has Trayshawn Harrison as his number 1 receiver to look for, but holding the ball on the ground keeps it out of USC's offensive hands, and that's going to be a key to this game.
That battle up front, with Oregon State's offensive line, which has changed a little bit, but there's still a lot of respect for them. This defensive line for USC is a little bit undersized, but believe me, they remember what the Beavers did to them last year, running all over them. Tuli Tuipulotu, not his older brother, but he talked about this week how he had to watch that game over and over to kind of get that bat out. So they're definitely playing for pride here, playing for that revenge. And USC's front has to slow down that run game, keep it from running the clock out, get that offense back on the field for USC. So that's going to be the big one. That defense definitely needs to show some pride, especially along the front, which is a little bit undersized, but they have a big task ahead of them to take on that Beavers offensive line.
Let's talk about the fun stuff, guys. The Lincoln Riley offense so far has been as advertised, averaging over 50 points per game. You can thank the air attack led by Caleb Williams and numerous talented receivers for that. But Angie, how does the Beavers secondary match up against this USC attack?
This is the best secondary I've seen at Oregon State in over a decade. A veteran group led by seventh-year senior Jaden Grant. Rajon Wright is an NFL prospect. He's a cornerback. Look for this team, though. They will pick on Katano Ladapo, safety for Oregon State, who got picked on by Fresno State, but he also led the team in tackles. He's a steadfast tackler. Oregon State is going to need to also be opportunistic with the takeaways. They have 8 so far on the season, and that is going to be a key. Like we talk about, this USC offense is going to be probably one of the strongest the Beavers face all season. So if they're able to keep the USC offense off the field and generate a couple takeaways to get their offense back on the field, it'll go a long way. But Caleb Williams with those legs too, that worries me a little bit if I'm an Oregon State defensive player.
I'm really excited to see this matchup with that Oregon State secondary and this USC receiving unit. As Angie said, one of the best secondary units that Oregon State's had, and USC obviously boasting a very talented wide receiver unit. Jordan Addison has just been unstoppable, 5 touchdowns through 3 games. Mario Williams seems to be coming on. They really haven't gotten the big-bodied Brendan Rice going, but just so many weapons they can turn to, whether it's Kyron Wood-Hudson, Taj Washington, or even those receiver or those running backs out of the backfield to help them in the passing game. Williams, held onto the ball a little bit too long in that second quarter of the Fresno State win. So I think he's going to be more cognizant of maybe rolling out a little bit more, getting out of the pocket, making things happen with his legs. Still had 2 rushing touchdowns against Fresno State, but I would expect him to be a little more mindful of not holding onto the ball too long if that secondary is locking up the receivers, maybe make some more plays with his legs. But I'm excited to see those matchups, especially with Addison and some of those guys in the Beavers secondary.
I am excited to see this matchup as a whole. Thank you guys so much for getting us ready to go. And you can read their work all season long and get the best coverage of this game at uscfootball.com and beaverblitz.com. Well, now that we are armed with all of this great info, we're bringing in some help to pick this game from a betting perspective that's coming up later in the show.